Happy New Year, my friends! Last year I did a video on 2023, the year of the sauropod. Now you guys know that sauropods are my favorite clade, and having so many offerings, especially in 1-35, is something I never thought I'd see. So even though we had this titillating schematic from Haolonggood, I didn't dare expect another year so bountiful in sauropods. I was wrong. Now fast forward a year, as we bid 2024 a farewell, I'm delighted to say that it too was a year worthy of that sobriquet. So here's the farewell march of 2024, the year of the Sauropods, Part 2. Now first, in 2023, we were gifted with the PNSO Alamosaurus, and although its form was beautiful at 1-55 scale, it was quite a letdown. And while still respectable as a 1-35 small Alamosaurus, it was really a disappointment for a large Titanosaurid. Well, Haolonggood's opening salvo for the year rectified this with the 1-35 Alamosaurus in January. And you can see the true awesomeness of it here. If I had any doubts about the possibility of this poster coming to life, this was a clear signal that this company means business. Now this thing is 73 centimeters or 28.7 inches high and weighs 2 kilograms or 4.4 pounds, so it's certainly worthy of Alamosaurus. And as expected, Haolonggood delivered in terms of detail and a beautiful paint job. I have to warn you that the paint application seems delicately applied, and you can see that mine already has scuff marks, which I'll have to patch up. Now here's a look at some of that detail, and on so large a canvas, it's really satisfying. 2024 also saw the making of a new star in my Armen, promoted from occasional guest appearances to becoming a regular cast member. And you can see why, as it allows us to appreciate how exquisite the scale detail is by providing context. I'm especially pleased that this variant, the blue, has such beautiful color blends, which also allows reflection of light to show that detail very clearly. Such exquisite detail really sells this as a living animal. Often a problem in the case of small 1-35 scale dinosaurs. And here you'll see the detail that we'll see in all Haolonggood's offerings, with complex folds and wrinkles down into the chest. The skin over the shoulder girdle and down the arm is a nice reflection of how fine the scales are in general. And no thumb claws in the arrived Titanosaurs show good background understanding. And the shin, like the forearm, speaks to detail quality. And we have a very interesting twirled tail. A detail I really liked was the spread of these osteoderms, suggesting that as the animal grew, the skin expanded outwards, with the osteoderms increasing in size while migrating outwards, with the new smaller ones emerging in the middle. To cap it off, it even comes with a beautiful base. And you can see the detail here, with a nice reflection in the body of water. There's also a tree trunk here on which perches a pterosaur. Now I don't have it now with me as it's out for painting, but just a quick glance elsewhere shows you the quality of the base. Gravelly, mossy, and other granular details speaks to high quality bases, and put together, it's a nice diorama. But while the big Titanosaur, however, there were bigger. As if to confirm a great year ahead for sauropods, February realized a crazy, ultimate fantasy of mine. Era Terra gave me my holy grail, a 1-35 Argentinosaurus. And when you talk massive, the Argentinosaurus is on an altogether different scale. Now here's how it looked standing right next to it. And amazingly enough, This model, at a height of 43 centimeters or 17 inches and a horizontal length of 67 centimeters or 2.2 feet, is only 1.8 kilograms, 4 pounds. I'm a believer in the idea that the fish rots from the head, and while there's no exact converse to that, I'd say that if the head is good, so's the rest of the body. Now look at that beautiful blue accent in the throat, and right here in the head, look at all that scale detail. Now just look at the complexity in the sclera of the eye here. I really like Adema's distinctive style of scalation, which differs from that of Haolonggood or PNSO. And you can see how different the scales look, and even the osteoderms have realistic highlights, but still blend unobtrusively into the rest of the integument. Now a big plus with Era Terra is that the artist Adema actually gives you the choice of colors. Now my choice was to create an almost black and white idea. It's a bit fantastic, I'll admit, but I really wanted something striking, so I was okay to massage realism a bit. And here's my almond for context. You can see how skillfully Adema blends the shades and fades very smoothly, really allowing the skin to pop. Every detail is taken care of, including the teeth, which are cleanly sculpted and painted. Now you'll see all the changes in size and shape, lending a real variety of visual interest. The scales and skin folds really dress the animal. And here in the body, every time I see the detail on this, the word smorgasbord comes to mind. And in the arms, you see how the scales literally just dress the arm very exquisitely. No thumbs is good. Just look at that detail in the legs. And the feet. And there really is no stone unturned when it comes to giving every possible inch of skin some realistic detail. Even the folds or perhaps vascularity over the belly scales. No laziness whatsoever. Now you may remember some of the spikes were broken in transit and have now been fixed. And in this picture, you can also see two very different types of osteoderm, and juxtaposing them like this illustrates the variety you can expect as you explore this huge canvas. And even here, going into the tail tip, nothing escapes. Really pleased I could get the blue highlights, plus the banded tail exactly as I wanted it. It comes with a base, and I like how Adema gave this some thought, having the name displayed on both sides, so you can present your Argentinosaurus whichever side you prefer. Of course, you'll see the detail like the fronds and the central stems of these cycads. And delightfully, even the footprint impressions hold scale detail. Incredible thoughtfulness. Now from something so huge, we go to something a lot smaller. In April, PNSO offered us what seemed like its first sauropodomorph in a long time, this 𝙩𝙧𝙡𝙡. And what a crowd pleaser this was. First, just look at those colors. Then, it's an early sauropodomorph, very significant if all you had before this was this old Carnegie Plateosaurus. In 1:35 means you get context when you display it with other sauropods. And good heavens, the color just speaks for itself. Look at those beautiful, vivid tones and blends, such striking colors we've never seen from PNSO in a very long time. And even at this size, there's no skimping on sculpted detail, as we see here with the help of my almond. Just look at the form of those feet. and even more so, those hands that just make me want to salivate. That large thumb claw and those two lateral vestigial fingers are so delicious. Again, just look at these wonderful blends. I'm totally in love with this color scheme. It's just really an example of the kind of coloration that's worthy of a PNSO model. It's amazing that it stands, although mine you can see is a little warped already and needs some heat treatment. Okay, back to something big. And this time, it's another wonderful sauropod from Haolonggood, the Chinese Sauropod Mamenchisaurus. And this is the brilliant blue version, and I hardly need describe how eye-catching it is. And just like with the Alamosaurus, Haolonggood seems to be picking up all the 1:35 scale models that we don't get from PNSO and other companies. I'm really happy because a large sauropod just isn't the same in 1:45. Now this is roughly how the 1:45 PNSO would look like next to us. Now, as striking as this is, what really surprised me was how the normally more ordinary brown-based version just blew me away. Now this is the brown and it's stunning. It's not just a normal run-of-the-mill mix of browns. As we move around, you'll see that there's been plenty of dry brushing with a lighter, I almost think, silvery color, which really makes the skin detail pop. Not just that, but in the neck, it actually lends a kind of patterning, as you might see here, which is so subtle. Now here's an example of how complex one area looks, with seemingly very many browns just infused into it, along with a silvery color. The detail is as impressive as you'd normally expect, as you can see here with my almond for context. I really like this scale aesthetic, and down the arm for example, you'll see almost bead-like scales. And here's an example of how the musculature is sculpted in realistic relief. Now look at these osteoderms. And here in the tail, you'll see more clearly that very subtle reticulated pattern created by almost a netting of white. Here of course is the tail club. And on top, the icing on the cake, what seems to me a kind of silvery brown highlight down the middle. So it's not just a straight brown model. To my surprise, I actually prefer the brown variant this time, even more than the flamboyant blue, and I like blue. And here's a nice bonus. Given the similarity in color, the PNSO could easily be displayed as a juvenile, creating a little diorama. What a proud representation of this Chinese specimen. And now, something smaller again. This is the Amargasaurus, and given what seems like it must be a display structure of some kind, it certainly lends itself to the flamboyance that suits Haolonggood's style. This is a model that's also valuable because in scale, it reminds me that medium or even smaller sauropods are medium or small only relative to other sauropods. Now this is a big animal next to us. One thing that Haolonggood didn't do was take the opportunity to give this Amargasaurus an updated look with a full frill, as suggested by Cerda et al. 2022. So you still have the tips of the bifid spine exposed, which as an aesthetic still looks good. Now at this point, we're no longer surprised that even smaller dinosaurs are infused with the typical detail seen in Haolonggood's models. And that's no less true in this Amargasaurus. As an example, just look at the skin detail in the ridge. And here you have a nice bonus in the tips of these bifid spinous processes poking out. The arm and shoulder area always hints as to how well dressed a model will be in terms of scalation. Here's my almond again for context. Now just look at that scale and skinfold detail in the hind limbs. Here we have the scale and the muscle detail in the tail, and ending with that signature brightly colored tip. This just fits very nicely with the flamboyant nature of Amargasaurus. So this is a nice little dinosaur that's easy to overlook, especially in light of the more massive sauropods from 2024, but really shouldn't be. Now, not so easy to overlook is this beautiful Camarasaurus we got in August. The beautiful proportions and form just speak for themselves, and what really makes me happy is that it's the exact kind of dull dark green that I love. Subdued, calming, with smoothly integrated markings, with everything faded in so beautifully. Then you have the accents of orange in the back. Now we've seen this kind of orange and green combination many times in Haolonggood, and here's an example. But in this Camarasaurus, we see how this theme can be varied into something else with a completely different feel. In the face and down the neck, you can see the colors blending so smoothly together. It's really hard to see where the transitions begin or end. And the head sports the Ramphatheca proposed by Wiersma and Sanders. Now here's an appropriate place to show you the almond for context. And you can see the osteoderms are painted differently. As to the detail, I'd describe it as extremely granular, which somehow suits my idea of this dinosaur. The wonderful mosaic of scale and skin folds in the arm, and down the side of the animal. I love the bead-like scales that Haolonggood often gives its sauropods. In fact, it's just pleasing how Haolonggood often gives scales that are just subtly different from sauropod to sauropod. An interesting detail is this seemingly open cloaca, suggesting it's either just defecating or about to. In the top view, yet more of that pleasing paint application. Now, this is actually the first time that quite a few of you highly suggested I get the other color variant, and I took your advice. In terms of detail, it's of course the same sculpt. But considering the browns, the purples, yellows, and even a bit of blue in the tail, it's just beautiful how Haolonggood paints its models, how they choose their color palette and then integrate all of it, creating a different feel and mood. And indeed, the two look incredible together. In either pure coincidence or as a riposta, PNSO came right back in September with their first bona fide 1:35 sauropod in like forever. And one of the coolest aspects of this is the action-packed pose, something you don't often associate with sauropods. Now here you can see a readiness, with the front legs spread and braced as if braking for a sudden change of direction or in preparation for combat at the sudden appearance of a predator. The swirl of the tail speaks of vegetation, and there's just so much life in this model that you rarely get in other more neutrally posed animals. you almost feel like there should be a predator or a rival male over here. Now in a close-up, we can see the kind of detail that PNSO almost pioneered, and it's still an aesthetic that many people prefer over Haolonggood. Now here's the size in context. Everywhere you see very nice detail, which is something that PNSO has given us for years. It's such a moving moment for me to see this important sauropod in 1:35 presented in such a high standard, and it shows that despite an almost standstill pace in 2024, PNSO is still in the game. Now definitely here to stay forever is Collectae with its sauropod for the year. Now after some delays, I finally acquired this little Dreadnoughtus from Collectae. And for Collectae fans, this offering continues its tradition of giving us nice looking titanic sauropods but in much smaller sizes. Unfortunately, Dreadnoughtus is the smallest out of the most recent ones, the Mamenchisaurus and the 𝙩𝙖𝙡𝙡, which is a pity given its estimated size. And even though it's not on the same level of sculpt and paint application as PNSO and Haolonggood, this sculpt is still very respectable. Now look at the form of the head, the throat pouch, and the effort made to add skin detail as we go down. This really does look rough in comparison, but taken together is of sufficient quality to elevate it beyond the level of a mere toy. You'll see that the skin structure is really rough, including 2 large osteoderms, and overall it's rather crudely painted. The only thing I find off-putting is the proportion of the arm here. Still, you'll see a colour fade here in the tail, which looks decent, showing they could have done the same for the rest of the animal. Overall, still quite a nice figure to have. And finally and fittingly, bringing 2024 to a close, our last sauropod needs no introduction. Nothing small about this titanosaur, the mother of all titanosaurids. This is the Haolonggood Argentinosaurus, and I'm sure much has already been said by many different reviewers, so it should still be fresh in our minds. Now this is the blue version, although I think of it more like grey or even black at times. It just looks freaking badass. Now close out from the head, and you already see even the sclera is painted differently from usual. And going down, we see the way the scales just seem to cram into the canvas. And here's the almond again for context. And all over, you can see that both in terms of detail and paint application, Haolonggood has spared no labour. And here you can appreciate that all this detail just goes on forever and ever. No thumbs, of course. Just look at the color complexity within each of these spiky osteoderms. And from the top, I love how you have that central black band flanked by 2 orange zones which remind me of fire. What a monster this turned out to be, as Haolonggood kept their promise first teased in this poster. And it's so impressive compared to the already big Alamosaurus. This mother is just massive. Now in a fit of madness, here's the brown version, because it's such a special model for me. I wanted a plain and a pattern example, and this brown is the one I got after changing my pre-order from the purple. We see again how having a different color scheme really impacts how the same model looks. And as you can see, the complexities you see here really harken back to the time when we received Haolonggood's Carcharodontosaurus. And having such a massive canvas gives you a playground in which to run riot, and Haolonggood came out to play in force. I can almost just shut up and let the details speak for itself. This really looks impressive. Now each of these weighs almost 5 kilograms or 11 pounds, and you better have reinforced shelves to put them on. Haolonggood has shown their serious, fulfilling promise after promise. Now next year seems to be when we can finally get that Brachiosaurus and hopefully that Aeneasaurus. Hopefully not as an exclusive. Now this has been an incredibly difficult year for me, and having these sauropods and sharing them with you really added much cheer to my existence. As we head into 2025, let me thank you for your support, taking the time out to write comments, sometimes very long ones, and I wish you a very happy new year ahead. I'll see you in the next video.